Okay, I'm reading something I wrote earlier, and this is very much based on looking at our trauma. And if you can see the journey, the hero's journey in front of the screen that I'm looking at, and we've got the hero's journey is basically from birth until, all of our time on Earth, and we have a call to adventure. And we move through life, we have mentors and helpers, and then we have death and rebirth at various intervals throughout our lives. And then we transform and we learn, to atone, and also we get the gift and we return, and we continue this cycle to this journey of really becoming who we truly are. Along with the work of Carl Jung, he would have suggested that we look at our shadow, and maturity clearly comes through interactions with others and experiences. And I wrote something earlier where this is going. I wrote something earlier that I want to share, very much in alignment what's going on in astrology at the moment, but also with the healing of complex PTSD, which is not a disorder, but it is a response to events, which I believe that most people have, most human beings have PTSD. Some people may be able to look at their childhoods and say, well, no, I had a really good childhood, and that's great. But nevertheless, through society, patriarchy, we are affected through, going through our entire lives. And, through school, we can have issues if we've not had trauma from our parents. Many of us are traumatized, and we want to often, without realizing, get into codependency, of expecting to be cared for or loved by others. And this can be very hampering. Whilst, it's beautiful that we interact and we can have love, often we seek outside ourselves for what needs to be healed inside ourselves. So I'm going to read something I wrote earlier, and you can, let me see the next slide here so you can see. Okay, so I'm just going to read, and I've got a few slide pictures that I'll change as I read. So this I titled, I didn't title, but it sort of looks like a title to me when I read it. I am not your mother nor your father. So these are big realization in our relationships with each other. And again, I'll begin this, that I am not your mother nor your father. So how many of you have had relationships or are in relationships that started off great and then turned into the dynamic of connection, or the connection of repeating the mother-father dynamic? So if we look at our lives in the relationships we're in now, or the things that we feel we can't do, or the things that we feel hurt by that we've not had, we can basically see often that we're repeating a dynamic that took place during our childhood, that we can refer to as arrested development, that has not been healed inside of ourselves. And we may have experienced loss, abandonment, and betrayal. And we then grow into adulthood, and we are seeking outside ourselves to be healed, through a partner or through something that's not going to heal us, basically. So we tend to dance the same dance and the imprint that we were given in childhood. And you can probably reflect on that and see where you're doing that or continue to do that. And there's no shame in that. It's just that imprints are very stuck in a cycle within us. So an example that I would give you, that I had abuse from my father, and then I had denial from family. And this is just very much the way it is in society. This is not my particular circumstance, but this is what generally happens, that there's abuse, it's denied, and then it's refused to be acknowledged. So in the refusal of that, of what did not happen, people refusing to understand what happened, we don't grow. And I've noted myself that in my own more intimate relations, that I sort of bump into the same wall, the same problem that takes place. And that can be for me that, that don't get acknowledged. And the idea would be that I'm not going to acknowledge you, and I don't want to talk to you about it. And if I do, then I'm going to be abusive. So that's not really spoken. That's just the dance that goes on. So if you look at your own life and you look at where you repeat in relationships, or it can be in any area of life, but look what you're repeating and where it came from. It's really important we get to the core of where it came from so we can begin to evolve it. So we repeat the transgressions that were given. And then unfortunately, society brainwashes us into not looking at the toxicity that we were brought up in, and the behavior then leads to also that we don't look at the governmental rule, we don't look at the religious toxicity. And when we don't look at the toxicity in society, then we don't evolve. So we've been given this opportunity this year with the current lineup of the planets, with the Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto in Capricorn, which is patriarchy, father, and, it means so much, astrology, the symbology. And we can see where we're so stuck and looping. And with what's happened, the breakdown of that patriarchal rule with the Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto is enabling us to, and also Chiron in Aries is really beginning to help us heal ourselves, heal this wound, so that we stop passing the baton on to the children that are coming in. Some of us have had children, some of us have not got children. And it's a journey that we're on to healing fully and integrating. So, I don't want people to think that, and I used to think myself with healing, that basically you get to a point where you're fully healed and you're skipping through the fields of daisies. It doesn't work that way. We integrate. And the beautiful thing is that through integration, we also still keep the wisdom. And we then pass that wisdom on to other people through our actions, or, we can have inaction as well, which can still contain wisdom. So until we look at the shadow aspects that Carl Gustav Jung suggested in his work, then we're doomed to repeat the same transgressions that have been given to us. And I've noted, that we heal, the healing, the wounds unknowingly by meeting those that display so we don't heal those wounds, rather we keep repeating those wounds that display the same toxicity if we don't look at what is not ideal in our lives. And the qualities and the treatment that we received can be repetitive as well. Also, being triggered and going into crisis at regular intervals is also a pattern that we get triggered and we go into crisis. And that's simply that we're just being re-triggered and we're acting out our 5-year-old unwanted needs. I'm referring to being 5 years old. It's not going to be 5 years old for everybody, but just to give you an idea. And we will replay that early stuff. So the unloved or over-adulated, the sexual abuse, the disdain, received acts, the disdainful received acts, and also the not being heard and the sadism within relations can be so repetitive. And the point is, we don't want to live our lives like that, so we have to really dig deep. We're lucky that when we do begin to clock what's going on, which is like listening to videos like this, looking at complex PTSD, looking at your astrology, there are so many ways you can do this. Often what happens though is that I will say we can begin to build a divine relationship with ourselves and start healing from the different parts that make us weep and bleed, that hurt us. But when we don't do this, if we don't do the inner work, then we will continue to punish ourselves and we'll punish other people, because that's what's been imprinted upon us. But when we do the inner work, we stop punishing ourselves and then we stop punishing others. And that work is looking at the inner critic, because when we begin to demolish the inner critic, then we begin to get rid of the outer critic. We can be sensible, we can still be in a place of being, what's the word? It would be, we can be aware of, what's not right, but we go to a higher level in our being. So healing really is no more or no less than abolishing the inner critic and coming to a great love for ourselves, and really deep love, not just talk. And then when we do that and we have a depth of love, we stop weeping and we stop, bleeding internally, that pain. And those days come to a close. I do know that suffering is, I do know what suffering is, rather, and that also I think that taking on the work has been a task and a half, and I can see why it's so difficult for people. There are things I had to do to really get to understanding and really getting into the depths of the work. And one of them was stopping drinking alcohol in 2012. That's not going to be the only thing. And not everybody has a problem with alcohol, so there's no judgments out there. It's just a case of understanding ourselves. So often, the events that from childhood will make us continue to fall into the crocodile pit, and we don't want to do that and crying the tears. And something that I've also witnessed is that the more that we come to loving ourselves with depth, we won't let others abuse us, and then we won't do the same dance. The steps that we take will be different. And, whilst the old steps may have felt familiar and felt good, and, there's a deep knowing that those steps that we used to dance are no longer working for us. So we stop doing it. And then we can dance new steps and drop the codependency. And then we also stop fawning. And fawning is part of codependency, where we're extra nice or extra pleasing, or well contend with things or do jobs that we don't like. And fawning is also where we put up with and tolerate. And so we stop tolerating, we stop putting up with, and we stop abusing our body with and ourselves with toxic people, places, and things. So again, this isn't about blaming. This is just about becoming aware, constant becoming aware. And as also we reparent ourselves and our inner child, we no longer, have a degree of, we stop hurting ourselves, and we get to a place where the pain begins to drop off. So let's just have a look at the next slide, which is really beautiful. So then we begin to take on the hero's journey, and we become the goddess, or the hero, in our own journey, and we begin to treat ourselves beautifully. And we also, the other thing we do is that we become a warrior type, that, we've got the wisdom as well. So it's not just one thing that happens to us as we do this work, it's various things. And it's quite a beautiful journey, but it's definitely not easy. If you need help, you want me to look at your astrology to get to the bottom of something that you're struggling with, and you want to integrate a wound, or you want to, look at where you're heading in life, definitely talk. Also, I'll talk about complex PTSD. I've got great knowledge of that, and because I've worked on my own. So that's it for today, and I hope this has been helpful to you. I'll catch you later. Thanks for watching.